In really simple terms, resilience is the ability to act anyway. If you watch on football, those guys get knocked down all the time. They get up, they act anyway. And I think every really successful person, whether it's an author, whether it's a book writer, whether it's an actress, they all have these stories where I came up against the thing that was meant to stop me and I acted anyway.
Today's conversation is for anyone who's ever hit a wall on their way to something important. My guest, Genevieve Skory, introduces a powerful concept she calls resilience mapping. It's a strategy for preparing yourself mentally, emotionally, and practically for the challenges that inevitably show up when you're chasing growth. If you've ever felt burned out, misaligned with your values, or stuck in a version of success that leaves you empty, this episode will help you rethink how to build a life that you don't need to escape from. It's about learning to act anyway, even when it's hard, and doing it with intention, joy, and purpose. Stay tuned. This is Fulfilling Work, Meaningful Life, the show that helps you find and create greater meaning in the most important aspects of life. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fulfilling Work, Meaningful Life. I'm your host, Anthony Kraker, and I am joined today by Genevieve Skory, a transformational speaker, business systems coach, and executive. Genevieve, thanks so much for joining me today.
It is a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about resilience today and what you call resilience mapping. So I was wondering if we could just start with how you define resilience. What is resilience?
That's the question of the hour, honestly. And it's funny because I was just talking to someone yesterday about resilience, and they said, "Oh, really? What you're talking about is a component of success."
Hmm.
And I said, "Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about." So, resiliency, and in particular, resilience mapping, is this notion that when you're investing your time and energy into something that you want to bring to the next level, there's going to be resistance. So we all hopefully have seen that. We say it's failure or we say it's hardship. Well, that's just a natural part of the growth process,
Hmm.
but we don't talk a lot about that. So, resilience mapping is this notion that you're setting yourself up foundationally for success so that you can overcome those obstacles. You can learn from your failures. You can proceed anyway. So, like in really simple terms, resilience is the ability to act anyway.
Gotcha.
In my head, act anyway. It's like if you watch on football, those guys get knocked down all the time. They get up, they act anyway. And I think every really successful person, whether it's an author, whether it's a book writer, whether it's an actress, they all have these stories where I came up against the thing that was meant to stop me and I acted anyway, small steps at a
Right.
time.
Great. Okay. So resilience mapping then is kind of thinking ahead of time about what those obstacles might be that could potentially make you want to quit and preparing yourself mentally to act anyway.
You have a soft landing, and then you're going to get back in that plane and you're going to go back up anyway. And most people do too much free falling,
Yeah.
which is scary. I don't think anyone lasts very long when their strategy is, "No, I'm just going to free fall and see what happens."
Yeah, that makes sense. So how does one go about doing resilience mapping? What are kind of the steps for that?
Yeah, and I want to share a little bit about how I came up with this. And it was based on being a type A personality.
Hmm.
So I'm a driver. If you can't figure it out, I pride myself on being able to help you figure it out and to bust through it anyway with excitement and fun and enthusiasm. And, it's a lot of emotional investment in the next step. The problem is that isn't sustainable long term. So I figured out after a few decades of failing that, and I say failing, but every failure brought me to a next level. But what I found was I was never super fulfilled.
Mm.
So when you're a type A person, your success is always in the future. My happiness is in the future because
Yeah.
it's tied to what I can do, not who I am.
Right.
And one day you wake up and you're like, I've got a great job. Pardon me, I'm making good money. I am living quote unquote the life. And then you're like, yeah, but I still like, ugh, why do I feel like there's like not enough yet? You know?
Yeah.
And so what was brought to my attention was this notion that I was delaying my fulfillment and tying it to the future, which was typically tied to things I didn't have a lot of control over. So, how were you ever going to feel success if it's always tied to the future and it's always tied to something you don't have a lot of control over?
Yeah.
So it occurred to me that my values were being ignored and my values were unaligned. So we start there with resilience mapping. So if you're going to go on this journey and you are on a journey and you know that you're going to need tools in your tool belt, and I consider resilience mapping like a parachute, you got to pack that chute. And the first thing you got to pack it with is values. What is it that you really value? And in most cases, at some point you wake up and figure out it's not another comma on your page. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like for me, it was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this because I want to spend more time with my family. But the more successful I became, the less time I spent with my family.
Yeah.
And the time that I did spend with them, I wasn't spending with them. And so I went back and had to look at my values, and then I had to look back at like, well, how do I define success? It's a job, it's a title, it's a paycheck, it's a this or a that. And so resilience mapping starts with, okay, get really clear on what it is you really value.
Mhm.
So that's a lengthy process because most people superficially will say it's security or it's freedom, and it's like, okay, but it's actually a feeling.
Yeah.
What aren't you feeling that you want to feel? So it starts with, okay, here are the things I value. For me, it was connection, more connection. So I would tell you that I was connecting. So I had to use the word more, like deeper, more connection.
Yeah.
It was more love. I wanted to experience more love. I want to give more. I want to receive more. I want to identify it in the space around me. And if I could do those two things every day, I could experience more happiness. That in turn would create a foundation for me to continue along my journey because I could set my day up so that for work, for example, I could experience those things while I was transforming to the person who could get me to my next level, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I love. Here's what I'm going to experience every day. I've got those values defined. And then the next step is to look at what what do you have to become? Who do you have to become to get where you want to go? So I want to feel these things personally, and I can do that every day. I'm in charge of those things.
Mhm.
To get to my next level, who do I have to become? Really take a look at that and then set up a system, whether it's training, whether it's podcasting, whether it's coaching or mentoring. I have a coach, and like most people, I am coach resistant, which is funny because that's my business, right?
Yeah.
But I had this call, and I came to the call and I'm like, yeah, rock 'em, sock 'em, whatever, buddy. Even though I'm paying for it, right?
Yeah.
But I was immediately called out for the things that I wasn't seeing about myself. So we all have these blind spots about who we think we are versus who we need to become. And then I was like, dude, I need you to call me every single day. But I felt like I had this sounding board, this person that was really out for my best interests to help me. So I'm setting myself up value-wise, I'm setting myself up character-wise, I'm setting myself up support-wise. And then the next step is to really think through, well, what potential obstacles are you going to come up against? And then there's a measurement of your success. So when you put all those foundational things together, and it's a strategy, like you've got to actually take the time to map that out and then
Yeah.
to measure those things every day. So when I coach people, my question is, did you experience that today? Why or why not? And you actually measure it as you go along. So it's a process, but it
S-
creates foundation.
So you actually recommend people kind of like keep a record of
Yes.
whether they're having those experiences daily, and then
Yes.
look back on the data and see how they're doing.
Yes, I think people should record their daily successes as they define them, things they can do and would. I think you should record that. I also think they should record their feedback, also known as failure.
Hmm.
And so that they've got a running list of things they tried that didn't work. And so they can make those adjustments. So then you're not stabbing in the dark, you know?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thinking ahead and looking at it every day, and just generally speaking, how much time should somebody spend on that kind of daily reflection as they
It's
go through?
I'm a big fan of give it 5 minutes at first because
Mhm.
it's a habit, so you gotta learn how to, it's like when we teach our kids to floss our teeth, it's like maybe you start with a tooth,
Yeah.
just do one tooth, right?
Right.
So I tell people optimally 15 to 30 minutes is great, but if you have to do 5, that's better than 0, but
Sure.
it's the consistency part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on goal setting? Because I think a lot of people that are going to resonate with what you're talking about today are going to be that type A, the driven personality, and goals in the personal development space. We talk a lot about goals and how to achieve goals, and it almost becomes where something like where the goal is the end in and of
Yeah.
itself. What are your thoughts on goal setting and their effectiveness?
I think goal setting and in particular goal tracking, very, very important. I think it's become this vague term in some ways that people are like, oh yeah, I set my goals. And I'm like, yeah, but how, like, did you blueprint them? You can have a goal to build a house,
Yeah.
but until you actually blueprint out what the house is going to look like and where the wiring goes, and you take all the time to set that all up, the element of the blueprint that resilience mapping talks about is that, how if you ever see a blueprint, sometimes they have those sheets that kind of like, this is the electrical, and they peel it
Yeah.
back. And this is, well, we're adding that kind of emotional component, that really deep, meaningful component, because I do believe in goals, but what I do believe is people miss out on a lot of living in pursuit of those goals. And that's just no fun. There's so much more to life than I hit the goal and now I'm going to set another one.
Yeah. There's something about trying to find joy in the journey,
Yeah.
joy in the execution of achieving, rather than just focusing on the outcome.
Yes. And the joy of achieving is the second part of the joy in the becoming, right? So it's like
Mm,
you got to enjoy becoming and then enjoy arriving. And those are two distinctly different things. And most people are really good at, I'll give myself 30 seconds of acknowledgement on the arriving, whereas the becoming is the longer part of the journey. You
yeah.
know, I have a quick story. I have a brother that's an ultra marathon runner. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's like a minimum of 50 miles, but he loves the 100 milers. And these guys are beasts. And the way that this works, based on my few races with him, is they actually set up a camp. They bring a support crew. They are like they're the perfect analogy of resilience mapping. They bring all the ointments and tricks and everything for what they know is going to happen, you know, during this 100-mile race, which is definitely for most people a 24 hours of running. He
Right.
happens to do it out here in Arizona, which is hot and in the desert. And we'll see him every 20 miles or so. And the question that we always ask him is, how's it going? And what we mean is, are you enjoying yourself? And enjoyment changes the further along the race.
Yeah.
At first, it's like you're playing your hype music, you're in beast mode, but by the third time around, I'm like, how's it going? He spends more time running that race than he ever will crossing the finish line. So the idea is, if that's where we spend the most time, how do we make the most of those moments?
Yeah. And it sounds like there's something, it's kind of similar to focusing on being present in the moment.
Yes. But that's hard. Don't you think that's hard these
Yeah.
days?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just a mundane example, right? You're maybe out to dinner with some friends or family, but everybody's got these things, right, to distract us. I mean, I've had those experiences where we're sitting around as a family, supposed to be spending time together, and every single one of us are looking at our phones, distracted, and we're not enjoying the moment.
Yes. And we have become addicted to distractions. And I feel a shift personally. I don't know if you do. You interview a lot of people.
Mhm.
I feel a shift where people have had enough of just being unpresent when they've redefined present. Like, I'm physically there.
Yeah.
You're not actually spiritually or emotionally there.
Right.
And as a parent, like you said, that's like missed opportunities to give your kids the best of what you have, and we're ignoring it. We're
Yeah.
real, and because I'm an entrepreneur and I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, my focus tends to be like, don't let work creep into those precious sacred moments that you're literally never going to get back. You can have both, but you have to have intentionality and boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have maybe a story that you could share about somebody that you've worked with as a coach and where you've seen them apply these principles of resilience mapping and where it's worked out well for them?
Yes, 100%. So there was a woman I was coaching, really, I think by everyone's definition, would qualify as very, very successful.
Hmm.
So making all the money, if you watch their Instagram, they're like, "Woo, look, I'm living the dream," all the things. And so I'll give two stories. I'll tell you the story of the this woman, two women, both the same, and very fun, but dynamic woman. One woman faded into the woodwork. Like, I was watching her, we're professional friends, just faded into the woodwork. And got to a point where we talked and she said, "I have just had enough." And I'm like, enough of what?" She's like, I'm not where I want to be for my children and my family. And I'm just going to kind of let my business coast. Like, she thought she'd set it up to a particular
Mm,
level, and I will just coast, and that'll be that. And, that's the decision I've made. And that's a person that just broke, right? Got to a particular point, couldn't see a way out, and thought, well, this will be good enough. Now, what she doesn't know, and anybody in business knows, there's no such thing as coasting in business. There may
right.
be a delayed decline, but it's not gonna no business is self-running.
Right.
So there was that. Then similar circumstance, woman in business, making great money, lots and lots of, you know, I've got it figured out. If you watch them on social media, you'd think, holy cow, this person is living the life. She's figured it out, all the things, and maybe boasted a little more than should have. I think reality, that's the salesperson's curse. It's like, let me sell you on how great my existence is. But in reality, we started connecting because she wasn't ever happy. So hit this peak level, but wanted to know, well, what's next? And I was like, what's next? You make a lot of money from home with your children, and you
Yeah.
have these multiple streams of income. And her comment was, yeah, but what's next? I'm a driver. I thrive on all of these things. And so we worked through what she really wanted out of her life. And when push came to shove, she just kind of squeezed out the values and justified that squeezing, like became so tied to her identity as a business owner that the whole mom part became adjusted. Made like she made some tweaks that weren't aligned with her values.
Yeah.
So we worked together for several months, and really what we did was, and by the way, everything when it's out of alignment becomes looked at through the lens, I think, of sarcasm and criticism.
Mm.
So it was kind of like, well, this isn't as good as it could be because, and I'm like, you're making more money than like 90% of the world, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this isn't working and I don't like this. And you just become very critical, cynical, and you become very critical. And I really believe what that is an internal reflection of how you're feeling about yourself, right? Your vibe is
Right.
coming out through your words and actions. And so we had to spend a lot of time go, and type A people don't like to spend time thinking. I know because I am a type A person. Like if we're not doing, we don't feel good, you know?
Yeah.
So we had to work through, and we got back to a point where it was like, hey, your main objective was to empower other women to live a life where their family priorities could come first. It isn't empower women to go make so much money that they never see their children or they don't pick their kids up from school. And that's a value. And I'm not saying that every working woman has to want to do that.
Yeah.
It's different for everybody. But we had to sort through those things. And I literally had to help her create a behavior, a new behavior of I want you to focus on just these things I don't really care what you sold today. I don't really care, about these transactional goals. These are the things we're going to start to measure. And what she found was a renewed joy in showing up every single day. And the people she worked with found a renewed joy and enthusiasm. And she actually got back this fantastic leadership vibe that so many people were attracted to at the beginning
Mhm.
because it was just this little teeny shift of, and it's kind of like you one day they call you and you're like, oh, there you are, hello, welcome back,
Yeah.
and her husband was thankful. I know her small children will be super excited 10 years from now that they had 10 years more more with their mom.
Yeah, I love that. What a great story. Yeah, that's awesome. So we talk a lot on this show about how we can find and create meaning in our lives. It's a fulfilling work, meaningful life, and work is just one aspect of a meaningful
Yes.
life. So I think this aligns really well. This idea that you're talking about of resilience mapping and finding or creating meaning in our lives, because that's, I mean, at the end of the day, we can make all the sales we want, we can have all the worldly success that we want, but if we're not living our values and we're not enjoying the moment, what was the point?
Yeah. And you know what you don't see on social media? You don't see people bragging about living their values. You don't.
Yeah, that's
You
so
know,
true.
there's no there's no counter on Instagram that says number of people I authentically connected with,
Yeah,
meaningful conversations that made people's lives better, even though no money was exchanged. Like you have to measure those things. Like society as a whole doesn't. And it's so easy to just reframe your thinking. And I really believe we have to, and I think the world is screaming for exactly what you're offering, which is more meaning. The new currency of success is meaning, not money.
Yeah. Yeah. I might steal that from you if you don't mind. I'll give you credit.
Great. Give me credit. You can use it all you want. Put it on a cup or a t-shirt, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely true. Well, do I understand you're going to be starting a podcast and you have a book coming out? Is that
Yes,
right?
that is
Tell
the
us about
case.
those projects.
Yeah, so I am getting all my ducks in a row to start a podcast, and it is designed to help people get the best out of their business without losing their souls. So, which
Yeah.
I know, I've done it. I've done it. If there's any mistake anybody could have made in the pursuit of their career or business, been there, done it, bought the t-shirt. There's times when I talk to people and they're like, they will say, "Oh, so I ran it and so they knew you." And I'm like, "When?" When? Because
Yeah.
there are definitely learning parts of my career that I'm not super excited to say. I would get A pluses from the people I work with. The idea is to keep moving forward. But I feel like right now there are so many people that are trying to run a business, are trying to start an organization, trying to start a community. So you have this real soul felt desire that I think the world would benefit from, but you don't know these things. You don't have someone on your side to go, failing is just normal. You
Yeah.
learn from failure. It's going to be tough, but that's okay. You are tough. Here's how we make you tougher. So my podcast will be about the business side of things from an emotional standpoint, including sales, because
Hmm.
sales can be very hard on an entrepreneur. It's like, I don't
Yeah.
want to sell I'm like, you don't want to sell the old way.
Yeah.
There's a whole new way of selling that's meaningful, impactful, and a lot of fun. So there's that. I've also have written a book on the 8 mistakes that most entrepreneurs, and we're publishing it as we speak. I have this sense that people could do better sooner if they understand some business basics, which technically most people who start businesses start with a passion. They're
Yeah.
they're artists, they're creators, and that whole business side just escapes them. And so this book identifies these are the key things that you really want to get under control as quickly as possible. And I'm excited for that to be coming out.
That's awesome. Do you have a release date yet for the book?
We're looking to release it end of April.
Oh,
End of
okay.
April.
So
Yeah.
next month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
It
We'll have
is.
to keep an eye out for that. That sounds like a
Yes.
great read.
Yes.
Well, Genevieve, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you about these really important ideas of resilience and values. And I think it's a really important conversation that we need to continue having. Because like you said, there are so many people that they're looking for that meaning in life and are oftentimes coming up short. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. And I'm here to support anybody that has a great mission or project and come alongside them and help because I think the world needs more. Needs more
Yeah.
more of you, more of your podcast, what you have going on. So thanks for doing that good work too.
Absolutely. And where can people connect with you if they want to reach out?
Best place, social media. It's my first _ last name. And I'm on Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn. Happy to connect there. And I respond without bots to all of my
authentically. You respond to
authentically connect. That's correct. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thanks so much again. I appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Please remember to check out my website, fulfillingworkmeaningfullife.com, to sign up for my monthly newsletter, Meaningful Insights. When you do, I'll send you a free digital resource that will help you find or create a fulfilling career. Until next time, let's make it a meaningful week.